Hey guys, thanks for coming to this video. Today I'm going to be showing you how to create this parallax effect, alright? Don't forget to subscribe. Alright guys, so let's go ahead and get started by actually creating a brand new project here. So I'm going to create a single view app, and I'm going to name this one Code Tutorials underscore, and I'll name it Parallax Effect. Okay? So we'll go through, I'm going to create a new folder on my desktop. I'll call it Code Tutorials or Parallax Effect. Alright. And to kind of look at the code of the finished product, we can kind of get a feel for how long it's supposed to be. So we can do the whole thing realistically in 80 lines, and even that, there's a lot of space in here. So first thing I like to do is I'm going to create just a new structure called thing, and I'm going to make sure it's identifiable so I can kind of run through it in a for right here. And it's kind of a good habit to make sure that the things that you run through in a for each are identifiable or have some way that you can append to the array of items. Otherwise, you'll run into an issue later as you build more complex things where you need to add and remove from a list and use it to update a view. You'll need things that are identifiable or hashable. So I'm going to start by creating that structure right there. I'm going to copy it over to our new project just kind of to save some time, but let's go ahead and get rid of this sidebar. We're not going to be using this over here, this canvas. We're not even going to need this, to be honest with you, because we're going to have one doc for everything. So inside of my struct above my struct, for content view, I'm going to create one more struct here called thing. Okay, so I named the struct thing. It's of type identifiable. I created its ID variable or its property, and it's going to be equal to an already instantiated UUID, as well as a new variable called title, and it'll be of type string, and it will have no default value. Okay, so when you kind of look at this next part, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to grab all of these. Okay, it's just kind of pre-made array that I had called things, and it's an array of these thing objects. Okay, so if that makes sense, just an array of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 thing objects. And their titles are A, B, C, D, E, and the ID variable is already going to be created automatically. Okay? So from there, let's kind of look at these different things. There's a few different pieces we need to make sure we have. We need to make sure we have a carousel index, which is going to tell us how far we are in the scroll or in the drag, when we look at each item. We're going to need a current drag, which is going to help us position the items while we're holding down the screen and dragging, and object width, which will help us kind of set up the spacing of everything, because if you remember, we're stacking everything on top of each other in the z dimension, and we're spacing them out accordingly with an offset in the x dimension. And then of course object padding, same principle. For parallax magnitude, that'll determine how much of the parallax effect you actually get. So for instance, if you look here, that 80 is determining how much of that parallax is occurring. I can make it higher or lower to taste, essentially. So I did that. I'm going to pick all of these. I'm going to take all these and I'm going to copy them over, and I would just pause and kind of look at them, okay, and add them, of course. And if you want to have consistent naming, so you can troubleshoot and name them exactly like this. So if first one's a state variable, which means we can change it. That's carousel index. Okay, it's of type integer. The next one is current drag. Okay, that's a CG float type, and it's also state variable because we need to be able to change it. Now, object width. To be honest with you, something I've always struggled with in Swift UI is the difference between var and let in the given context, because we actually can't modify vars unless they're state vars inside of here. So that's just kind of something that I've actually, at least there's further limitations. I could easily have used let here and it would have been okay. And you'll even notice that we're not getting the errors that we used to get in the old Swift UI kit, Swift/UI kit framework that we used to use. So parallax magnitude, object padding, and object width are all finite variables, okay? Just vars, no state var, okay? So now, really, the meat of everything we're doing is right here, from lines 30 to line 82. So I'm going to start by kind of creating the outer shell, okay? And the outer shell is going to be this z-stack right here. So I'm going to, inside of the body, I'm going to create a z-stack, and I'm going to get rid of the hello world. And if you look, what we have inside of there is a for each, okay? So I'm going to go inside, I'm going to say for each. And what exactly do I want to scroll through? If you look at the example, okay, we want to scroll through all of the things, okay? So, sorry, get rid of that guy. So we'll say for each 0 dot dot less than things dot count. Okay, to keep track of where we are inside of this for each loop, we say I in, and we can use that to refer to the index that we've gone to so far. Okay, so what we'll look at here is, now what are we doing? So we're saying for each one of these items inside of this array, I want to create another z stack. Okay, another z stack, and inside of that, I'm going to put an image. So what is the name of this image? Well, we need to make sure we have a set of images inside of our assets library. So in my finished product, I went ahead and just went to Pixabay, and I grabbed 5 images. I named them A, B, C, D, and E. And you'll notice that those names correspond perfectly with title. Okay. And the reason I did that is because now I can say, well, the image, I'm going to pick the image with name things object of index I dot title. That'll be the name of the image that I want to put inside. Okay. And so what we need to do whenever you work with an image, you need to make sure it's resizable. You want to make sure, for me, I like to do scale to fill so I don't have weird borders. Okay, so I'm going to grab those 2 items. I'm going to bring them to our project. So this is the one we're working on together here. So I'm going to have an image, and I'm going to make sure that that image is resizable and can be scaled to fill. Okay, so oh yeah, we want to make sure, of course, we say self dot because we're within a closure. All right, that's why we need to say self dot things. Okay, self dot things right here. And now we need to set the frame or the actual size of the image. So we're going to say dot frame. Okay, we're going to give it a width, and we're going to give it a height. So the width I'm going to give it is going to just be equal to self dot object width plus the parallax magnitude. So why did I do that? What essentially I'm doing is I'm saying I want the width of this image to actually be larger than its container. So that way there is room, there's almost slack for it to kind of move within it. You know, if it's already cropped to the edges, then there's no way for it to shift left and right. Okay, so that's why it's self.objectWidth plus 2 times the parallax magnitude. That guarantees or it ensures me that I have room on either side. Okay, so I'm going to put that there. And now as for height, well, I did 500 just because I liked that, but it's whatever your needs are, right? So I'm going to do 500 again so we can get the exact same product. Okay, so now we're looking at the overlay. What I did in here is I put an overlay of almost like a black overlay. Do you see how it's black over here, right? But this one is not faded out, so you'll see how it kind of changes the focus, right? And so I put an overlay here that essentially it's saying that the overlay is color black with an opacity. It's either going to be opacity of 0 or 0.3. 0 meaning it's completely clear, and 0.3 means it's 30% opaque, okay? But before we get to that, we need to look at this function that I had made at the bottom here. It's called func is current index, okay? So let's go ahead and we'll write that one out together. So within content view, but with outside of the body, so we'll go outside of the body, we'll say func, and we named it is current index, so is current index, okay? And I'm going to make the argument or the parameter be I, so int. We'll say if I is equal to the carousel underscore index, then return true. Else, return false. Okay, we need to make sure that this function understands that it will be returning a bool. Okay, so quite simply it's saying, hey, if the number I feed you is equal to carousel index, then this is true. And if it's not equal to it, then it'll be false. So where do we use that? We're going to use that right here when we say dot overlay. And if you look back at this function now, it makes a little more sense. We're going to use a ternary operator to say that the overlay is a black color with an opacity that based on this ternary operator will either be a 30% opaque or 70% transparent, or it'll be 100% transparent and 0 opaque. That's what this is here. So if true, 0. If false, 0.3. Okay. Ternary operators are key in this language, so you're going to have to make sure you're very familiar with them if you want to do anything of any complexity, realistically. Okay, so the next piece here is the offset. So the offset, now we're going to start having a little fun. Okay, so you'll notice this is the final product. You'll notice that in the final product I had offset in 2 places, right? Because we have offset of each of these, because remember that the way we make this is that we have these guys kind of offset next to each other. They're all actually stacked on top of each other in the z dimension. But we also have the offset of the internal image, okay? So the one we're working on right now is the offset of the internal image, okay? So right underneath overlay, I'm going to paste it and we'll talk about it. So what does this say? This essentially says we're going to make an offset in the x dimension, okay? And that offset is going to be equal to the following. So the first part here, where it says CG float of I minus self.carousel index times self.parallax magnitude, what that's saying is it's going to set up the, if you look at this right here, it's going to set up the offset. This guy has a plus 80 offset by default with it. I'm not dragging at all. And if you look here, this one now has a negative 80. This has a 0 baseline. And we're talking about the internal image. And this one has a positive 80 based on the fact that my parallax magnitude is 80. Okay, but do you notice how it's kind of interactive while I'm dragging right there? So what essentially this next line is doing, where I say the offset is equal to the first line, that's kind of like a constant, right? And then it's plus, constant relative to the current drag. Then I'll say plus self.current drag divided by self.object width plus object padding times parallax magnitude. Well, this portion here is kind of allowing you to move based, it's essentially acting as a multiplying factor of the parallax magnitude. But this portion here is detecting how far I've scrolled but have not yet committed to the left or right, and it's using that to shift the parallax accordingly. Okay, so that's what this is right here. It's kind of complex to think about. So if you're kind of stuck on it, you don't really have to. You can always just use it and try to dissect it by manipulating it later. Okay, so looking at the next piece here, we of course have the animation. We're going to just do a standard animation of ease in out with a duration of 0.3. That's right there. Okay, now we finished that z-stack, okay? So within that, I'm actually going to put a shadow with a radius of 2. I'm going to give it, so if you look right here, what I'm doing is I'm going to give this whole thing has like a small shadow with a radius of 2. It's kind of hard to see. Then there's I'm giving the whole thing a frame width of whatever the object width is and a height of 500. So why is this one object width and this one is object width plus 2 times the self-parallax magnitude? Well, what we're trying to make sure is very clear here is that you have an inner image that's actually wider than its container, and that's what allows it to parallax left and right. Okay, so that's why you have the image inside of a z-stack, but the z-stack has smaller dimensions from a width aspect. Okay, so you don't have to put this background red. I'm going to give a corner radius of 10 right here. Okay, I like using random background colors on things because if my image is working, it looks great, and if it's not, I know where I went wrong. So I can see kind of where the red is. So I'm going to go ahead and put those now on the outside of the z-stack. Okay, that's all that is. And we're coming to the end here. Okay, we don't have too much left. So the last piece now is the actual offset of these containers, right? These containers are technically z-stacked items with just an image inside. Honestly, I could have made it like a group or something else instead. I just kind of like using z-stacks because I don't see the harm in it. So the last piece here, remember this is the finished product, we're going to kind of dissect and move forward, is let's go ahead and look at this offset, okay? So the offset in the animation, I'll copy over and we'll talk about it. So after corner radius, I'm going to put offset in animation. So let's look at what the offset means. So what you'll see essentially is it's made of 2 parts. 1, it's made of this right here, and then 2, it's made of this right here. So what we're saying is that it's going to be equal to, if you can almost think of this as a unit, okay, it's the object width plus the padding, and then right here you have the multiplier. So it tells you pretty much how far over we've scrolled, right? So if we scrolled, right now our carousel index is 0, now it's 1, now it's 2. So what it's doing is it's multiplying our index, or 1 minus or I minus our index, okay, and it's multiplying that by the width of the object and its surrounding padding. And then we're also adding the self.current drag so that we have this interactive feeling while we're dragging, okay? And then what we're doing is we're just putting animation outside of that, where it says animation.ease in out with a duration of 0.1. Okay. And the last piece here, and this is the absolute last piece, is this gesture. So let's find the start and end, copy, and we'll talk about each component inside of it. I'm going to put underneath the animation. Okay. So this is a drag gesture. If you've watched most of my videos, you'll see that I use this a lot. You'll actually see this concept a lot. This is pretty much how I do all of the most complex things because I think it's actually very functional. So what we have is we have a drag gesture, and whenever this drag gesture is triggered and a change is noted, you'll notice that we set this, remember this guy right here where we had current drag? We set the current drag equal to our drag.translation.width, which essentially means, when I click, if I've moved 50 pixels to the left, click, 50 pixels to the left, that means I have a drag.translation. The width of that translation that's what this is right here, okay? So it's the start point, start x minus the end x, and that's what I set the self.current drag equal to. So that's it, and then that right there, if you notice, because it highlights, that's how we determine the offset of the containers, and that's how we determine the offset of the internal image. Okay, so that one is that. But now, if you look at the on-ended portion, which is from here to here, so the on-change is from here to here, and the on-ended is from here to here, that's the last piece, just to be very clear, the drag gesture itself so the entire gesture is from here to here. Okay, so the on-ended portion is from here to here. And what we're saying is, if the current drag is greater than the object width over 2, so what that means is, if the current drag, if I've moved at least the width of the object, half of the width of the object, then I want to commit, okay? So technically, when I move from left to right, that's the first half of this if statement. So from here to here, if it commits forward, that means I've moved at least half of the width of this object over, and that's how my quote-unquote commit, okay? So if that's the case, let's pretend I do that over here. So as long as, let's go to the middle, and let's say if I go from here to here, I've committed. That means I'm within this portion of this statement. If I go one more, that means I'm within here to here, okay? But when it says if self.carousel_index is greater than 0, what that's saying is that you have to at least be on the first image to actually scroll over. Because what happens if I'm from here to here? Well, I don't want it to commit again, right? Because clearly that was not my intention. So instead, we need to make sure we set a limit of saying that your index, you have to be at least past the 0th image. So that's what this piece is right here. That's why it says if self.current drag, the first part is checking, have we committed to moving? The second part is checking, all right, well, are we at least on the second image? Now this looks almost exactly the same if you really look at the context. What it's saying is, all right, well, the first one is saying if I move at least half the width of an image in this dimension, in this direction. Now the question is, what if I move half in this direction? So that's what this is. It's saying if self.current drag is less than the negative of self.object width, right? Negative because we're now moving in the opposite direction. Okay? But notice that when I'm on the last image, I can't commit over again, right? Can't commit. That's what this is right here. We're saying, well, at the very least, you need to make sure that self.carouselindex is less than self.things.count minus 1. That's how you guarantee that you can't commit over too far. Okay, and that's what this is here. And at the end, once it's kind of made its determination of pretty much of whether or not you've committed, we can set self.current drag back to 0 again. And setting it back to 0 is what allows it to understand our next drag and the translation.width. So theoretically, if I save this and now I run this, actually I can tell you right now, it's probably just going to show up with red blocks because I don't have the images dragged into this tutorial. But we'll go ahead and try it out and see what happens. And what I'll do is after this, I'll actually drag the images into here so you can see the final product. So there you go, it's built. So you'll see the red blocks, right? There you go. But you can't see the parallax effect, right? Because I don't actually have the images in here. But the parallax effect is actually definitely happening. You can actually see it on the edges here. So what I'll do is I'll drag my images over so you can actually get a feel for that. So I'll go to my images, grab them, drop them in, and if I run it one more time, you'll see that the entire thing is completely functional. Here it is. There we go. Okay. Okay? Please feel free to drop any questions in the comments below. Sorry it's been a while since I last posted a video, but I'm really excited to be back. And yeah, if you guys have any questions or want to see something a little more complex, please feel free to let me know. All right. Thanks, guys.